Senator Marston, I understand you have three bills before us. Which would you like to have? Well, I guess we'll take a
How about we start
here.
with 706?
Thank you. Just 1 second. We'll register our attendance and be right with you. Let's see, there's quorum is present, and thank you. Senator Marston, Senate Bill number
706.
Okay.
706. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. We do have some line amendments. If I could ask you to have the clerk report those.
Move line amendment.
Second.
Mr. Chairman, the line amendments are on line 13. After 1 period, strike the remainder of line 13, all of line 14, and 2 period on line 15. On line 16, strike 3 period, insert 2 period. And on line 18, strike after violation of, strike subdivision A2 or A3 and insert this section.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, what that does is it takes out the language related to driving in the rightmost lane.
Okay. Perhaps you could repeat that, Emma, driving in the
rightmost lane.
rightmost lane. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was the one that could have caused some problems had we left it in there with overloading of trucks in the right lane, making it harder for passenger cars to exit or to enter the highway, and it was impractical. But I tell you, it served the purpose. We got a lot of information out there, to folks that the legislature cared about what happened on Interstate 95 on January 4th, and that we're attempting to do something about it. And while it turned out to be somewhat impractical, at this point in time, with that out, what the bill does now, and I can have Captain Maxey, talk about that. But what it does at this point in time is it creates a secondary offense for using your cruise control or your compression brakes during weather that is where it's precipitating in a frozen fashion. And all this allows to do, and I'll have the folks from the state police verify that, is that if there was an investigation and if there was another offense, like you were speeding or you were doing something, this secondary offense could also be brought to bear. That your computer on your truck is telling you that you used compression brakes at the time of the accident, or that you were on cruise control during that period of time. So it does allow for that to be charged, but only as a secondary offense. You can't pull anybody over and say, you're using compression brakes, or you're using cruise control. It's only after something happens you've got a charge, and then this could be a secondary offense, which right now it would not be. And if I could have the state police just verify what I told you.
Major Maxey.
Mr. Chairman, Ron Maxey, Virginia State Police. The Senator is correct. Secondary offense, we would have to have a primary in order to place the charge. It would be a benefit in a civil trial to show that it is a clear violation of a state code. But again, it would not be something we could pull the vehicle over for initially.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, that's the bill, and I take any questions.
Sure. Questions from the committee?
Mr. Chairman, I don't think we had a voice vote on the substitute.
All those in favor of, do we have a motion on the substitute?
We had a motion and a second. We never voted on it, I don't think, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All those in favor of the substitute, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Substitute's now before us.
Oh, okay.
And what I think is obvious here, so a question for the patron from me is just I can assume that the intention is to achieve a greater level of safety in these active snow, sleet, freezing rain. What's the difference if cruise control is on in those circumstances?
Well, it's not supposed to be already. What this does is create a penalty as a secondary offense. You're not supposed to be, I believe, using those things in inclement weather, but there's no charge for it. But this would be a secondary charge. If you had something else illegal that they had done, then you could go to look at the computer on that vehicle to say, hey, not only were you speeding, or you were driving recklessly or whatever, because that's what I observed.
Yeah.
But your computer tells me that you were using those two aspects of your driving, the brakes and the autopilot.
Okay.
And you could get an additional charge.
We have a representative of truckers, but let's question from Delegate Bloxham.
No, sir, Mr. Chairman, not a question, but with Dale, I think it is proper training, and he can speak to it, proper training not to use cruise control during bad weather, and also the brakes. I think that's proper training, but this would just reinforce it if I'm not mistaken.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Please.
Dale Bennett with Virginia Trucking Association. Jackknives are a matter of loss of traction is what creates them and causes them. Two of those causes are use of cruise control or engine compression brakes. And essentially, they automatically take over controls of the wheels. And when that happens, they start to spin and lose traction. And then you have the jackknife occur. The bill in the form with the amendment most certainly reinforces what drivers are trained not to use these in those kind of conditions. And it will certainly reinforce that for the industry and what our companies try to do to prevent these accidents from happening.
Thank you. Well, before we ask you whether you're for it or against it, we'll take testimony from others in the room. Delegate Tata has a question.
Actually, I just had a motion when it's appropriate.
Okay. Anyone in the room care to speak against the bill? How about online, Robert? No one online. Anyone against? Anyone for the bill? Well, okay.
Move to report.
Right.
Move to report.
Properly second with
amendment.
with amendment, and we'll vote on the board. The vote is 6-0. Your bill passes, Senator Marsden, and we're ready for the next one. If you
Great,
are.
thank you so much. Next, we have 705, which is a bill involved with towing. And I don't believe we have any substitute or amendments to this bill. So if you are ready, I'll go ahead and tell you what the bill does.
Please do.
Well, here's the problem that we have. There have been some fairly outrageous tow bills that have been presented to operators of truck vehicles, one of them in excess of $200,000, which end up having to end up in court and what have you. Now, that's a real anomaly. But what the bill, and this has been a point of contention between the truckers and the towers, and we think we have a solution. We have worked with the major towing groups, and we've worked with Dale Bennett with the truckers, and we think we have a temporary solution while we study this issue. And that is this. When you have a tow bill over $10,000, and it's involving a 26,000-pound vehicle, which is going to be, I would assume, a semi kind of truck, is that it will be required for the person who tows you to give you the name, number, contact information for the Office of the Consumer in the Attorney General's office. And what we have set up informally between the Trucking Association and the towers is a group of, I believe it's, Matt, it's two towers and a trucker that are going to examine the thing and say, no, that's an outrageous tow. Now, this isn't going to be used in evidence in court. It's not going to be, have written testimony or anything like that. But as a group of professionals sitting down to solve a problem without having to pass laws and regulations and do what West Virginia does, which is all kinds of details on what constitutes how much you can charge for this tow or that tow. And as chairman of the Transportation Committee in the Senate, I want to write a letter to the various agencies to sit down and see if there's anything else we need to do. It's anticipated that the majority of disputes could be solved in this manner. And if the tow truck driver doesn't give that information, which hopefully will be imprinted on their invoice, they'll be subject to a $1,000 fine if they don't give the operator of the truck that they're towing that information. So we're giving these two industries an opportunity to come up with an informal way of arbitrating these situations so that we're not creating more regulation and more law that we don't have to. And we're still going to take a look at this in the off-season. And I'll take any questions, but I do have a couple of folks who can comment very quickly.
Well, any questions from the committee? Well, they're not stacked up here, Senator Marsden, so we'll go with testimony in favor of the bill.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Matt Bento with the Northern Virginia Towing Association. I'm also authorized to speak on behalf of the Major Incident Heavy Recovery Operators Association. The Virginia Beach guys aren't here as well, but they support this bill as well. And like Mr. Chairman Marsden said, the solution that isn't included in this bill is a lot of additional work on the side that's being done by the private sector instead of getting the government involved. And we believe that we'll be able to solve these things without, a lot of government getting involved, which I think is preferable to everybody. And I really want to thank Chairman Marsden for working on an issue that is very complicated. He did a great job negotiating this. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, Zach Lemaster with Gentry Lock, represent the I-81 shipper operators, and just echo the same comments of Mr. Binko and thank the chairman for working on this bill.
And you are in favor of the bill? You're speaking in favor of
Yes,
the
sir.
bill?
Yes, we're
Thank
in
you.
support of it.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Dale Bennett with Virginia Trucking Association. I too want to thank Senator Martin for his hard work on what can be a very difficult issue to deal with. We support this as a temporary solution while we take some time in the off season to study it and try to come up with something that helps resolve these issues that we've been experiencing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I move to report.
Second. Trip you up.
We're ready to vote on this then? I am. You're on a roll here, Senator, as
Well,
6-0
there you go.
in favor of your
Well,
bill.
this is where I cut my teeth. This was my first committee in the General Assembly in 2006. So it's just good to be back on in transportation.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say to our good friend, the senator and the chairman of Senate Transportation, see how friendly we are over here in the House. We were going to pass your bills even though you had none of your colleagues present today, Senator.
You remember, we in our first transportation meeting, we batted 1,000. We got them all.
And I will say you were very kind to me the other day. in your
Yeah,
committee also, so
we are the
thank you.
friendly committee. I will, if I can have an editorial comment. When I first got here, transportation was a committee dealing with hugely complex issues and long dockets and what have you. And the fact is that it has been. We've solved many of the issues, and so we're seeing ever increasing dockets. You couldn't find any interest in P&E back then, and now it's the center of the world. So these things kind of come and go in cycles, and this is a good thing because I think we've solved a lot of the transportation issues in the Commonwealth, and we're dealing with some kind of nuanced areas now that are of that help us all. But at the end of the day, these are not the biggest bills you will ever.
I would say, Mr.
Well,
Chairman.
your time has expired, Senator Marsden.
Mr. Chairman, I will say, Chairman, on this side of the body, we come and go about every 2 years as Chairman of Transportation over here, so
Yeah, there we go.
Robert will attest to that.
We'll reset the clock and hear Senate Bill 722 if you're ready.
Thank you, and I believe if I could ask you to have the clerk report the amendments to the bill.
Please do.
Mr. Chairman, on line 14 of the bill, after the word "no," insert "motor." On line 14 of the engrossed bill, after "wheels," strike "partially or." On line 15 of the engrossed bill, after "any," insert "motor." And on line 15 of the engrossed bill, after "fully," strike the remainder of 15 and through "partially" on line 16. Mr. Chairman, what this does is clarify that we're talking about motor vehicles, not any vehicle, and we're talking about wheels that are fully on the curb, not partially.
Mr. Chairman, I move to accept the amendments.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Please explain
Thank you,
the
Mr.
bill as
Chairman.
amended.
Here's the problem we're trying to solve. We have a mile in my district. We have a 1.5 mile long road, and it's also occurring in another district. On one side of that road is 1.5 miles of apartments, condominiums, townhouses that are rather oversubscribed in terms of the number of people living there. On the other side of the road is a riparian boundary between the street and the sound wall on Interstate 495 between Little River Turnpike and Braddock Road. It's about 1.5 miles. And what cars are doing, and most of these folks, they're hardworking contractors, and they park their trucks, they park their vehicles, and they pull them up on the curb. Sometimes it's the two right-hand wheels that are up because they're all parking parallel in the same direction. They just pull up, put their wheels on top of the grass or whatever in that riparian boundary. And, or if there's not enough room, you pull in straight ahead, go up over the curb and park that way. It has become a huge problem with dumping. They're contractors, they don't want to go to the dump. And so when they park their cars this way, you know, nobody seems to be paying any attention to anything. And so they dump, I've seen sinks, wood, drywall, you know, busted up cabinets, you know, liquor bottles, beer bottles. It's just every 6 months there's a wonderful woman there who organizes a cleanup. But we're trying to get the parking under control, which is the next step in getting the dumping under control, because what I'm going to advise folks with flyers on their trucks is, as of July 1, you can't park up on the curb. Fair enough. But that the littering and the dumping has got to stop. Otherwise, we'll have to close that side of the road to parking. And on the other side of the road, we can put in, to make up the difference, put in straight in parking and have VDOT do that. I don't know whether I can make that happen. That's up to the VDOT and the General Assembly. But it's an attempt. But this is the place where the noisy vehicles have been altered to make Mini Coopers sound like Ferraris. And it's also a place where we're getting increasing gunfire. There are a lot of parties that are taking place when people pull in from after work and drinking and leaving the bottles there and harassing people in the neighborhood. It is a broken windows kind of situation, and this is the first step in getting control of a neighborhood that is heading in the wrong direction. And that is what the bill does and why I've brought the bill.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the committee? Is there anyone here that speak in favor of the bill or against, or in the queue?
Mr. Chairman, I move to report with amendments.
Please state your amendment. Oh, with amendment. Okay, yeah, as amended. I would have a question. So Planning District 8,
Yes.
for the patron, that's a pretty big area. So basically, this bill is seeking to make it illegal to park with two wheels on the curb.
Yeah, and the notion here is, I don't want to penalize other parts of the state or whatever where, you know, and this is up to the, and I should have mentioned this is up to the police to make a determination as to whether they have something they want to enforce here. I don't want them enforcing people at a crowded high school game where a few people have pulled up on the curb, or there's a utility vehicle that has to, you know, to do that. This is under police discretion, but it's only, you know, for Northern Virginia where we are having these problems pop up in certain neighborhoods of folks, and we've got to get it under control, and this is a very non-draconian way to do that.
So it would seem obvious to me that there is a curb in the area that,
Yes.
that you're wanting to deal
Right,
with.
it's not like a shoulder
Okay.
that's level with the field or a ditch or anything like that. It is an installed concrete
Yeah.
curb.
Perhaps we could involve Joanne Maxwell from VDOT in this conversation. I'm just trying to envision right-of-way. If we move this bill forward, we're going to be defining the boundary of what is allowed permissible parking only in the case of when there is a curb. So if there's a shoulder or there's a gravel shoulder, this bill would this be affected? And perhaps any considerations that you'd like to?
Mr. Chair, Joanne Maxwell from VDOT. No, this bill specifically addresses a curb, which is a raised mound of concrete, for instance. This would not address situations where you don't have a curb. Those situations would be addressed by signs that might be governing parking. You know, there might be no parking signs there that would provide law enforcement the ability to enforce. And there'd be, you know, in some of these areas, there are no parking signs, but nevertheless, this makes it a violation if you've got your wheels sitting up on the curb. Wheels are not intended to be sitting on curbs or straddling curbs. They're intended, the way the law reads, the wheels should be to the side of the curb and not over the curb. So
Thank you.
it would only apply in those situations where there is a curb.
Okay. We have a motion properly seconded. We'll go ahead and vote on this. So we're going to keep you off the uncontested docket because I'd like to check with some of the other people in Planning District 8, but your measure passes 6-1.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all very much for your consideration, and we'll see some of you maybe tomorrow in Senate Transportation. We have 5 bills.
You're up, Senator Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Senate Bill 362. I'll tell you what happened that caused me to bring this. As you all recall, we changed the cycling laws last year to essentially give 2 cyclists the right-of-way in the lane of travel. And so I represent western Prince William County, and this was kind of out in the Nokesville area. And my constituent contacted me. He was driving a dually, crew cab dually with a 4-horse trailer, had a horse in the back, 5:30 in the morning, comes around a curve, and he's doing 50 miles an hour, which is the legal speed limit. And it's dark, and he comes upon 2 cyclists in the lane of travel. And they now have the right of way to do that under the law that was passed, I think, last year, the year before, which frankly gave many of us some pause on that. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending upon how you look at it, he avoided the cyclists, went off the road, wrecked his truck, tore up the trailer, the horse broke its leg, and he had to shoot it. And so, pretty traumatic experience for him, and he contacted me about this. So I worked on this thing, and I know that the cyclists are passionate about their ability to drive 2 abreast on the highway. Where I come from, it is the most foolish thing in the world you could do because you are surely going to get run over. But I understand some places they think they can do that. But as a compromise, what I've proposed in this bill is just to say, if you see that car coming up behind you, move over and let the car go around you. Anytime you put a car, a truck, a tractor trailer, whatever, at odds with the cyclist, the truck's always going to win. The tractor trailer's always going to win. And this is the situation. And the cyclists are furious with me, and I get that. But the cyclists know what the law is. And that's the interesting thing. You ask anybody that's an avid cyclist, they know they have the right of way. You ask a person driving that pickup truck, and they say, what in the world are they doing tying up the lane of travel? They don't know to look out for them on blind curves when they're only going 20 or 25 miles an hour and the car's going 55 or 60. And I think we actually created a really dangerous situation for these folks. I'm not trying to take away their ability to ride on the road, although I think they're crazy for doing it. And I've had a couple of my friends actually who've been killed doing this, who were avid cyclists, and they competed and so forth, and were hit by cars trying to utilize the right-of-way. But anyway, that's the bill. It's the fairest compromise that I could come up with.
Thank you. My understanding is that if this were to pass, we would be returning the law to where it was prior to a recent change?
No, it's not. It's a compromise, because before they couldn't ride 2 abreast at all. Before they had to stay in single file. Yeah. And the law allowed them to now ride 2 abreast, which again, I don't think was wise for these folks. This just says you can still drive 2 abreast, but when the vehicle is overtaking you, you've got to get in single file to let that vehicle get around you. Mm-hmm. So it's a compromise. It really is a compromise bill.
I have one more question I'll ask the other members of the committee. Are bicycles, typically road bikes, equipped with a rear view mirror?
I can't answer that question.
Okay,
I
thank
really
you.
don't know. I don't,
Yeah, fair enough.
I don't
Any
know.
questions?
I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, I'm interested in hearing the testimony, but I just can tell you, living in Virginia Beach, I'd like to speak to the bill. This is a problem in Virginia Beach, and the problem is when there are two, a lot of times it becomes four and it becomes a pack. And I can't believe we have to legislate this, because you would think people would just move out of the way or get in single file. I know when I cycle, I get in a single file if somebody's coming up behind. But I support this bill.
I learned as a child to get out of the way of the car on my bicycle, but when they know they have the right of way and they will not.
Yeah, well, apparently that's worked well for you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
may I?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Senator Stewart, I struggle with this as you do. About 2 weeks ago, I had an individual struck on a 4-lane highway in Botetourt County and killed, and you probably received emails referencing that most recent incident. But I do agree. I agree with the senator and the legislation. I think we have to give way on secondary roads, even on primary roads. We've got to concede and move back in single file. And I think it's and I'm going to be criticized just as you are, Senator, but I think we've got to do everything we can to be as safe as possible. This situation, I think the sun was in this young lady's face and she just did not see the cyclist. And I appreciate people riding bikes on the highway. I understand what they're trying to do, but at the same time, I think safety is paramount. So, Mr. Chairman, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the
Mr.
patron?
Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, we have two lit up, but I get speaking to the bill. Okay, Delegate Watts?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question of the patron. So I'm just trying to make sure I understand what's happening. So on line 34, you have, however, the failure to move into single file formation shall not constitute negligence per se in any civil action. Does that mean that there's no contributory negligence in a case where there might be?
Can you guess where that came from, Delegate Watt? Can you guess where that came from?
I'm thinking two people.
So, yes, that's what I call the Searable Amendment. And
That's one of the two people.
And
I was
I agree
thinking
to it.
of,
I think
yes.
it's a reasonable, again, I think it's a reasonable amendment because we don't want to, if that cyclist who is struck has a valid claim for personal injury, I don't want to do anything to disturb that. And this was the best language we could come up with.
Thank you.
To preserve that cause of action.
And that gives me comfort that you're trying to thread the needle between the bicyclist concerns and the safety concerns.
We're trying to be fair in this one, and
Thank you.
I like to roll the whole law back if you want to know the truth, but I didn't do that.
Yeah.
I didn't do that.
Okay, at this time, we'll take testimony from people who have dialed in, and those against the bill. I can't tell who is who there, so would you raise your hand if you're ready to speak against the bill? And that is all three, so I can just barely see the name. Is it Jillian? Okay.
Yep. Am I allowed to share a video? Just a short clip. I was gonna play it while I'm talking. Is that okay?
I don't think we're set up to do that, or.
Oh, you guys can't see? Okay.
Uh,
Well, thank you for allowing. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm here against this bill. I'm not a cyclist. I'm a mom, and I often most school day mornings, I'm with my kids, either biking them to the bus stop in Arlington, which is about half a mile away from our house, or leading a bike train, which bikes about 2 miles to our school with anywhere from 5 to 20 kids, depending on the day. We bike on quiet neighborhood streets. We observe the law. We are very safe. But in being safe, most of the time, the safest place for me to ride is to the left of any children I'm riding with. I've been leading group rides for families for the past almost 10 years this fall. And in riding with kids, the safest place is for the adult to be to the left. This law would change that and say exactly when a car is on the street with us, that we would have to get single file and we would lose the protection of having an adult to the left of children. This is a very sort of anti-family bill. It's a bill that makes it harder for those of us with kids to bike around our towns with our kids. I appreciate the attempt at bipartisan compromise. I do respect that compromise is often the way to go here. I think that this bill would make Virginia less safe overall. If you do feel the need to go forward, I do think there are two very important areas that should be amended. The bill should be made clear that it does not apply when any of the riders in question are under 18, so that it wouldn't apply in our case with our children. And the bill should not be a primary offense. As was noted in a couple bills back, you do have the option of making things a secondary offense. So you are telling people how they should behave without giving the police the ability to step into a situation. Okay. And
thank you, Mrs. Burgess. I think in the interest of time, we want to share some of this testimony time with a couple other people who are queued up and ready to speak. But thanks again for calling in.
Thank you.
Mrs. Brantley Tyndale. I'm sorry.
That's me. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Brantley Tyndale with Virginia Bicycling Federation. We were excited to see the House pass the Bicyclist Safety Act last year, 75-24, including a majority of the subcommittee, which allowed bicyclists to stay two abreast. A clarification on the law change. This is a pretty clear reversion to what it was before July of last year, without the amendment related to contributory negligence. So we were allowed to ride two abreast unless approached from the rear by vehicles or motor vehicles previously. This law is a benefit to safety, visibility, and ensuring drivers passing appropriately, including parents riding with kids, as Jillian mentioned. The cycling community opposes this bill. The model legislation in Delaware showed an 11% reduction in bicyclist crashes after they implemented this policy, and that was a 5-year study they ran. I serve on the Department of Motor Vehicles Traffic Safety Task Force, and when I inquired with them about their data, they found a 3% reduction in 2021, which only reflects 6 months of this law having any effect. And they shared no evidence that riding two abreast had contributed to any increase in crashes. There's no need to change this law. Bicyclists choose to single up when a car or a truck is bearing down on them already. I know I've ridden a lot, and it is an uncomfortable situation to be in. But the law, as is, allows us the discretion to choose, which allows us to account for approaching traffic, bends, lack of visibility ahead, road conditions, and other safety conditions, which the patron mentioned were a part of the anecdote that he shared, darkness and coming around a bend.
Thank you.
I understand the anecdote, and I understand that it sounded like it could be a traumatic experience, but it also shows that the driver proceeded in error. They were driving in excess of the speed of being able to control the vehicle in the dark around a bend.
Thank you, Mr. Tyndale. I hate to cut you off, but we do have one other person lined up to testify, and we really need to move along here. So that leaves Zachary Desjardins.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and delegates of subcommittee. My name is Zach Desjardins. I live in Alexandria, and I ride all over the Commonwealth, and I oppose this bill. So last year, a bipartisan majority of this committee, both chambers, passed the Bicycle Safety Act to allow people to ride side by side. Thank you for that vote. Unfortunately, Senator Stewart did not vote for that and has introduced this bill to weaken it. And rather than provide any data, he provided a single anecdote from a constituent. And unfortunately, the Prince William County Police Department doesn't even have any record of this crash. And the senators only really released some very basic information. So I have just a couple of questions. Where and when exactly did this crash take place? Because all we have is August 2021 at 5:30 a.m. somewhere in Prince William County near Knoxville.
Mr. Tyndale,
if the senator felt so strongly.
Mr. Tyndale, you're welcome to testify in favor of the bill or against the bill, but I don't think we're going to allow you to question the patron. Thank you.
Of course, I'm just raising some questions.
Understand?
So if the senator's constituent felt so strongly, why are they not here asking for this change?
Okay. Okay.
And then the other, Senator Sorvell claimed this bill was a compromise, but who else did he compromise with? There's been 100,000 crashes in Virginia in the past in 2021. Why should we change one law based on a crash that may not have been reported to the police?
Okay.
The reason we're passionate about riding to abreast is because it saves our lives. And it seems like it saves 2 cyclists' lives in this situation.
Okay.
So I guess my point is there are a lot of unanswered questions, which is why I'm asking you to vote no. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tyndall. Anybody in the room here to speak against the bill or in favor? George, are you a cyclist? I've done the same thing myself. Yeah, so that concludes, I think, the call-in testimony. I think that we've exhausted all the questions and comments. We operate by a motion.
Move to report.
Let's register our votes on the board. Yeah, and I'm sorry, Tara, I should have had you speak to the bill. Did you say you wanted to? Okay. The vote is 7-1. Your measure passes, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
I believe that concludes the business before the Subcommittee 3, and we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Thank you.